We now move on to the President, who will lead us on the Corkill Award.
Hello there, can you all hear me? Yep. This has been such an exciting year in terms of applications for the Corkill Awards, and it was quite tricky to find two, to narrow it down to two who were better than the others, but the others were all very good. So if you were another, please remember that the others were just a little bit better. Could I please welcome the Stoke Road Surgery? I don't know who's here from them, to come and receive the Corkill Award and tell us about it.
They're not coming onto the stage, Patricia.
Going to come down.
My name's Maggie Morris, and this is my colleague, Peggy Dyer, and we work together at a surgery in Cheltenham, or just outside Cheltenham. We've heard so many wonderful initiatives today that we feel ours is extremely simple. But maybe simple is effective. I don't know. We've been asked to be brief. So we belong to the subgroup of our PPG, and our remit is to look after the over 75s in our practice and their health. So we decided that we would start afternoon teas on a Sunday for elderly people who are lonely in our area. So why did we do this? Well, as we know, loneliness is linked very much to health. This is very much research-based, and the recent Joe Cox loneliness report produced a lot of research showing the link between health and loneliness. Sundays were always highlighted as the most lonely day for older people, so we decided that we would do our teas on a Sunday afternoon. We had huge support. And I have realised today that we belong to a wonderful practice who are so cooperative, so supportive. Our practice manager and our GPs have been behind us every way, in helping in every way they can. At the same time as we were thinking about this, there was an article in the newspaper about a practice in Liverpool who were doing exactly this. It was the staff who were running it, not the PPG, and this gave us a starting point. We did try and contact them, but that didn't really work out. So first of all, we had to find money, we had to find volunteers, we had to find drivers, we had to find equipment, we had to advertise, and of course we had to find guests. So we were very lucky that one of our local trusts in the area had a Kickstarter award, and we were given £250 to get us off the ground. Volunteers really came from sort of personal connections and Contact the Elderly, who have been extraordinarily supportive to us, sent us a few people who had inquired through them, and they also sent us some guests who had come to them. We also had to make posters and invitations. So we have these invitations which we hand out to our elderly folk. Our drivers, again, drivers are a bit of an uphill task, but mostly they are people that we have approached ourselves. They all have to be DBS checked, which Contact the Elderly did for us, and we produce guidelines for them and for our volunteers with the teas. So with our trust money, we bought tables. Charity shops were great for all the china and everything else, and our cupboards in our own homes were raided for everything else. And most importantly, of course, were the guests. So we went to GP meetings and told them the sort of criteria which Peggy will tell you about that we needed, and asked for referrals. We have an RGN for the elderly working in the area, and she produced us some names. We had a wonderful village agent, and I know that's not something that you're all familiar with, but in Gloucestershire, the villages all had an agent who worked with the elderly, and he was absolutely wonderful at referring people to us who he had come across. And social prescribing, which is very much part of our practice, they also referred. So now do all the community nurses, healthcare assistants, anybody now, because now we're known, now we're going, people know about us, so we're getting connections from all over, all sorts of people. So I'm going to pass you over to Peggy, who's going to explain how it all works and the challenges that we've come across.
Sorry about these old knees, but I'm sure some of you know about knees. I'm going to sort of talk about 4 areas, and I'll be as quick as I can because we haven't got much more time. First of all, about our guests.
Just hold the microphone a little closer to your mouth.
Sorry. First of all, about our guests, then the challenges and the benefits, outcomes for patients, and how do we take this forward in the future. Our guests, right. Population of our town is about 14,000, 1,300 are over 75. We have a register of 20 guests, not many you may say, but slowly growing. 12 to 14 people attend the teas every second Sunday of the month. The average age is 87, and we've just had a 100th birthday. Tea is free. We don't make a charge. Volunteers make the cakes, the sandwiches, and they also volunteer to drive, and we don't pay for petrol. We do receive donations occasionally from the guests, and the project has been costed, so we know how much it would cost us if we had to pay for it, in case we want to expand in the future. The challenges really have been about getting sufficient volunteers, especially drivers. Sometimes we're unable to take some of the older people because of their disability. And we're working on this at the moment, but to get transport, I mean, this is yet again the difficulty, transport. But that's one of our future hopes, that we can manage to bring everyone who wants to come. Of course, we also had a difficulty, a challenge this winter with the snow. And so we did have to cancel one of our Sunday afternoon teas. Benefits, I'm sure you all know what the benefits are and the outcomes for our guests. The group come together, they've developed amazing friendships. What is also interesting is many of them have lived in the same town when they were born, so they were actually meeting people they went to school with, which is fantastic. And they do love their afternoon tea out. But I've got a couple of quotes from our GPs. One particular one: "This is an incredibly worthwhile venture. It is loved by the people who attend and gives a great sense of positive community spirit to the community of Stoke Road Surgery." And in fact, I can't remember if you mentioned it, but we actually run it in the surgery. So we help to develop a new additional part to the surgery. And in doing so, we were able to say we will have our teas in the surgery on Sunday in the waiting room. So we have a cupboard there. We were in on the changes so that we could actually ask for those things. Another GP said, patient W looks forward to this event and is much happier, which is very, very helpful. Sorry. Okay, what shall I end up with? I know. I think we'll end with how we're going to take the project forward. And it certainly is our intention, if possible, to make this 2 Sunday afternoons a month. I think we'll be able to afford it because the local people are coming up trumps. Local business recently gave us 250. The Rotary gave us 250. And we've got a little money coming today, I think, from the Corkill Award, which I have to say won't just be for our teas. We are collecting and raising funds for a new ECG machine, so I think some of it is going to go there. Thank you very much.
There we go. What an amazing idea. You say, quite a simple idea, but such an effective one. And of course, the beauty of that idea, with a little bit of hard work, enthusiasm, and a bit of old china here and there, it can be replicated elsewhere. Relatively easy to get off the ground. So, congratulations. Here's your award, and very well deserved. And there's the cheque to buy a little bit more tea with. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a runners-up, and I have much pleasure in introducing Jim Jackson from the Thornton practice. I'll get you a roving mic. Oh, you can come up.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud to be here today to represent my practice. The project, I think, that may have put us in this position is an art project. We decided as a practice we weren't hitting the younger ages. So with the practice manager, a nurse, and some of the PPG members, we went into a local primary school. And the object was, how can I be a healthy hero? And you can imagine, we had a wonderful time. I mean, I feel so proud to have been with these children. They decided that 19 was very old. And so we said about eating, exercise. We talked a lot about it. How can we get this message across to other people? Oh, we can draw, miss. And I said, great. So I'll be as quick as I can with this because I know you've got a train to catch and you're very lucky because we haven't got anywhere we live. So they produced a wonderful set of posters. These are 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And the posters came in and we presented them in lovely, our practice are great, and they gave us some new display boards, and we put the posters all up around with their ages, and then we invited them into the practice, all these children, on a very quiet afternoon, I might add. And the local radio got in on it, and they were delighted. Oh, look, there's mine. And we gave them a little Easter nest, which we said is okay, and a mandarin. And they all sat round eating their mandarins first. So they were really well trained. But this isn't a gimmick. This is going to carry on and is carrying on. We're going into other primary schools. We're doing similar things. And this has won a Great Education Award. We went to the Blackpool Tower, went on the tram, all of us together. You'd think they had won the World Cup. And we came back on the tram. They didn't know. They knew they were nominated, but they didn't know they'd won. And so you can imagine the Tower Boardroom. You've seen Strictly. You know what it's like. It was packed with parents, educationalists, all sorts of people. And what a platform to tell them what the PPG was. And so we're progressing this. We're healthy heroes. We've got tennis camps going. We've got camps for the over 60s. We've also got a bio blitz a fortnight today, which is creepy crawlies, healthy heroes, making things at Wyre Estuary Country Park. and that's for all the family. And the doctors are coming, they're doing health checks. So this is it, we're engaging with the community. I don't like the word engaging, because to me it is when you get married. But we are meeting together, and they're going to do sand art. I'm really excited, I can't wait. I'm so passionate, I can't tell you how passionate and grateful I am that I was asked to come along to the first meeting 3 years ago and help form the PPG. And I've just found my niche. My husband never sees me. And thank goodness we were on board last week. This week, PPG week, it was chaos. No patient access, NHS phones down, Monday morning, can you imagine? But we were there. And we explained, we said, look, we're having a problem, it's all right. And that's what being in a PPG is. It's you having your patient focus. Every time, they're the chief ones. And we said, never mind, it'll soon be sorted. And it's still going on. But we were there every day this week, helping the patients, just explaining what's happening and giving up-to-date information. We had a captive audience because they couldn't move. The appointments weren't going because they couldn't be registered or anything. So they read their booklets and they sat there and they were quite happy, even though they were probably poorly, some of them, but they knew that they were going to be seen and that they were lucky. So I say, thank you, Thornton Clevelys. There's Howard, my colleague there, for asking me to come along 3 years ago and form Thornton PPG. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Not many of us around. There we go. Again, what a great idea. I think your passion and enthusiasm is fairly obvious for everybody in the room. So that's.
Imagine me in front of a class to teach.
But as I said, I mean, I worked in the NHS around patient engagement, although I realise you prefer involvement. And I know how challenging it can be to involve children and young people in healthcare issues. So it's a great piece of work. So many congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
You will see that the final item that's been put on the agenda, the trustees have asked me to make some closing comments. This is always a bit of a challenge for me because I never know what any of the lecturers or the groups are going to say, so it's always a hot talk with what's going to come out. But the first bit's very easy because the balloons all around the room remind us that this is a 40th birthday party. And we are in fact celebrating. And it is, I think, something to celebrate that a small charity running on absolutely minimal resources has survived for 40 years, has grown, has flourished. And I think this is a moment just to think back to all the early trustees and to the current ones who are achieving so much on so little. Our first keynote speaker was from Professor Lacani, who spoke to us as the current president of the Royal College of General Practitioners. There are about 20 medical Royal Colleges. That one is the biggest, and he is a very active member of it. He, particularly for our interest, has a long-standing patient participation group, which was founded many years ago and which is going extremely well. And he was able to speak as a GP of his pleasure and his pride at his group in his practice. And I think that is a kind of model for us because these are difficult times and his is certainly, as indeed we've heard others, going very well. He gave us a sort of survey of the role of the GP with the 5 Cs. This is being bandied about in reports in London and particularly from the King's Fund. But the threads are important for us as patients because it reminds us of where the principles are. And he put continuity first, coordination of care, comprehensive service, first contact care, and recently the business about adding community. He then gave us some sharp figures, which were really to help us as patients understand value. There is, of course, a very severe squeeze on funding in the NHS, So he gave us figures. These are disputed a bit because some of the figures we read in the paper are England and Wales, some are England and some are Scotland. But the order of magnitude never changes. And the crucial figure really is that the average cost of a GP service per patient is around 125 per year, whereas a single outpatient cost to see a single specialist on one occasion cost the NHS 220. An ambulance service to the home costs £300, so that whatever the rights and wrongs of the differences in quality, there is a huge explanation of why governments are persistently trying to get more and more done in general practice for very obvious and powerful reasons. He reminded us that 1 million consultations take place in general practice all the time. This is a regular feature every day. And that does give us a sense of scale, because some of us don't go that often to the GP, and it's helpful to remind ourselves that the average contact between the average NHS patient and the average general practice is 5 a year. Very solid data analysed from a huge series, and 3 of those are with the GP face-to-face. So there is a lot of talk about other services and other arrangements, but the hard fact at the moment is that on average we will see a GP face-to-face 3 times a year, and much more if we're under 5 or over 75. He talked about happy doctors, which was a very topical thing to do. He believes that happy doctors provide better care for patients, and nobody's going to argue with that. But there is a problem that we have to face as patients, which is that the ambulance service has a lot of unhappy staff. Midwives have got surveys showing they've never been more disgruntled, and the 50-year-olds are leaving. The junior doctors were so demoralised that they actually took industrial action in Britain as doctors. And GP morale from Professor Campbell at Exeter is reported to be lower than ever before, with more 50-year-old GPs, the most experienced, retiring than ever before. So there is a question outside the realms of this conference and the PPG. There must be something in the NHS that isn't right if so many different groups, managed in so many different ways, are all either under stress or unhappy. And that is something all we can do is sort of pass on to the authorities who are responsible. But something is wrong somewhere. And then our second lecture was from Patricia Wilkie, who was sitting beside me, our president, who gave us a 40-year overview of this association. And she gave a very clear and effective tribute to the 3 GPs who had the vision as long ago as 1972 to set up groups in their own practices, unknown to each other and quite separate, as she said. And that then led, thanks to Dr. Tim Payne, who was one of those in Bristol, who sadly was invited to join us today and has had to go to a funeral, which would have been would have been very nice on our 40th birthday to have had one of our founders here. But he had the drive to actually initiate a national association, and that's why all of us are in this room today. Patricia Wilkie just summarised the philosophy, her philosophy, our philosophy, that ultimately patients and doctors working together is the optimum, and that's what we all have to strive towards. And on the whole, individual consultations work pretty well in general practice. Most surveys show that most patients are happy most of the time of their consultation. What doesn't work so well is the group relationship, doctors as a group and patients as a group. And it's the philosophy of Patricia and N.A.P.P. that we here must help to build a better group relationship over and above the individual relationship. And so her experience then in the Royal College was that she was the first lay member who attended the council of the college, the governing body, as a lay observer. She took us through the very sad history of what the NHS did on participation. It's just awful when you look at it in the series that she gave it to us. Community health councils formed, community health councils abolished. PALs formed, PALs abolished. Links formed, links abolished. And now it's Health Watch. And as in my view, the original community health councils worked extraordinarily well. It is really rather sad that we've had this very expensive series of patient groupings and association within the NHS, and it means the consistency of a registered charity which is independent as we are, which can do our own thing and just go on without constant reorganization and chopping and change becomes even more important. She gave us an emphasis on trust, and ultimately she sees the whole of the issue of building and supporting and encouraging trust between doctors and patients, both ways. She spoke, and interestingly, in the same way that Professor Lucani done, both of them picked out continuity as a theme, a problem, and a key principle, and I'll come back to that. And she, I think, concluded by using the enormous experience, which I'll also come back to emphasize the importance of what N.A.P.P has done, what N.A.P.P is doing, and looking forward to what N.A.P.P will do. In the workshops, the one I'd just like to pick out, because there were 4 different ones, but the one I thought is new and relevant was the one on the CQCs and PPGs, because here we are seeing a significant shift of policy. From a rather distant, that would be interesting, wouldn't it, sort of approach a few years ago, we saw, I think, in the room today, real engagement by CQC managers who were saying quite clearly they wanted to be in touch with CQCs, they wanted to hear from CQCs and patients, and they would talk to CQCs when they did the routine inspections to practices. So this is a shaping of a new relationship, and I think all of us in patient groups need to reflect on that. The soapbox, I always think, but I thought particularly today was tremendous fun. I thought the variety of topics, the sharpness of the presentation, it was a textbook example for students of how to communicate a message in 90 seconds. So I think we had a treat today. And I must say, I think a few minutes ago, the Corkill Awards were, I think, inspiring. I mean, I think the latest research on loneliness is very sad. It carries a risk of death that is comparable to having had a heart attack. It kills people. And everybody knows it's bad for health, but what isn't clear, what does anybody do about it? And I think today in this room, I learned for the first time just how much local coordination, local activity, and building up from within a practice and by a PPG, which I thought really was inspiring. Each year I try to trail for you 1 or 2 new things, because I'm a bookworm, I read journals for fun, and what is actually new this year. And I offer you one thought, which is that we've spent about 30 years discussing the business of doctors recording consultations with video and getting our consent, and there's a routine now, and we sign our consent, and it's pretty common. And it has proved invaluable for teaching. There is no doubt that medical students and junior doctors can learn more from videos than many other methods. They can actually see what happens. If they get something wrong, they can go back and replay it and actually learn. It's a marvelous teaching tool. But all this has been about doctors recording patients. The new thought that I can report to you this week is the development of patients recording doctors. And there is now a literature emerging in which patients are starting to record consultations for a variety of reasons. Some of them find it very helpful to have a record. What did the doctor actually say? Some of us don't always take in everything a doctor says. There's lots of evidence that we can be a bit swamped, particularly if we have several problems at once and the doctor's busy dishing out various advice. We can't always get it all every time. It can be very useful to show our wives or our husbands or families. And it can be particularly useful for setting the agenda for the next consultation. We didn't get that bit quite clear, we must discuss that again. And the patient is empowered by this. So we are moving to the possibility that it will be us asking the doctor's permission to record the consultation, which in law they don't have to give, and which we in law don't have to ask. But I think, as we've spent 30 years saying, it's very good practice for the patient to give written consent. And my advice would be that it would be very good practice to get the doctor to give written consent. But I leave that with you. I want to come on to continuity for a special reason. It happens to be my own principal research interest, and I've had 30 years worth of work on it and a string of articles. And it so happens that this year has been seminal, both in good and bad findings. Taking the bad first, the article by Levine et al. From Leicester, which is not that far, Midland article, showed in the past 2 very important findings. The first one, this is Professor Baker's, he's the Professor of General Practice at Leicester. He did a fascinating survey showing that what happened when a NHS patient got to see an NHS GP that they wanted to see, compared with the same patients and the same practices who, for one reason or another, ended up with another GP. And some of those control GPs will, of course, have been very experienced. Some years ago, Levine et al. Showed that the chance of the patient ending up in hospital was statistically significantly less if they got the GP they wanted to see. Very, very subtle, very interesting illustration that the quality of the discussion between a doctor and a patient who know each other and really communicate is so superior that it keeps people out of hospital. So we knew that. More recently, we've had some very bad news from the same research group in Leicester. They reported this summer that, in fact, the rate of continuity of care, the chance of an NHS patient seeing the GP they want to see, has fallen by 27% in only 5 years. It's bad and it's getting worse. And that's really serious for PPGs, and it means that all of us have got to think very hard of what we can do to make sure that our doctors actually value the continuity, and I'll come on in a moment to why that matters. But it's the message, the new message is it's getting worse. And on top of that, the British Social Surveys, which is the biggest attitudinal survey of the British population, have just reported, and they show for the first time since the Second World War, satisfaction with GPs is falling. Now, Professor Lakhani made the point, and he was quoting slightly old data, that it was the most satisfactory part of the NHS, which it was. But it's falling, and it's falling quite fast. And I believe those two factors are actually directly related. If you see a doctor you get on with who helps you and you can communicate with, and you think that he or she has got the message from you, you go away satisfied. If you see a stranger, you are less likely. It doesn't mean the stranger isn't very competent or very clever. It just is you may not click quite the same way. And so those two, I believe, are actually related. Now, to finish on a sort of personal note, I've spent my life wondering about continuity and how to prove that it really matters. And there are lots of arguments. There are people, in fact, in this conference, I've had people saying, well, if you see a stranger, they may spot something that the regular doctors missed, which is true, that does happen. But it doesn't happen anything like as much as the regular doctor spotting subtleties that the strange doctor won't. And just to summarize for you, the benefits for you, for me as patients, are as follows. Patients are significantly more satisfied if they have continuity of GP care. Patients follow advice significantly more if they have continuity of GP care. Patients take up offers of preventive medicine, flu jabs and cervical smears for women and all that sort of thing, significantly more if they have continuity of GP care. They use hospitals significantly less for both A&E and for admissions. Unnecessary admissions go down sharply if the GP knows us. It's cheaper. There are fewer follow-ups and extra bits and pieces if the doctor can sort it out. And so we have a background of very good evidence. But it's not that convincing. Most politicians don't think it's that important. So my life's work has been how to find a measure that would really catch their attention. And a few years ago, 3 years ago to be precise, I came to the view in the research team I'm working in that the answer was death. The one thing everybody's interested in is dying. And it's the one thing I think politicians will have to take some notice of. So in the last 3 years in a research group in Exeter, I've spent the time doing what's called a systematic review of the relationship between continuity of care and death rates. And it started with 800 articles or so, and we had to work through all the published material. It's not original research, it's looking at other people's publications all around the world. And this is going to be published within this very month. I wondered if it was going to be out for this conference, actually, but it's actually going to come out in June in BMJ Open, which I'm happy to say is an open access journal, so every one of us can dial it free of charge. And it's called Continuity and Mortality, Matter of Life and Death. And the finding, which is new, is that there is a significant relationship between continuity of doctor care and subsequent death rates. And that, I hope, will help to persuade our political masters that this is of some importance. It's not an optional extra, it's not a convenience, it's not a social courtesy to give the patient the doctor they want, it actually matters. The medicine is better. And a second, an unexpected finding, which I think is very helpful, and which is going to, I think, bring the profession together, is that for the whole of my life, continuity of care has been seen as a GP thing. All the GPs write about it, talk about it, it really matters in general practice, and it's seen as part of general practice. We have discovered in this systematic review that continuity of care is associated with lower death rate in specialists too. This is a doctor problem, doctor phenomenon, not just a GP phenomenon. And it's very striking. There's one very famous article by French psychiatrists who found that if they broke continuity of French psychiatrists in France, the death rate shot up. So this is a universal truth. It's about all doctors. It also comes from 7 different countries in 3 different continents. So it's not about health systems, it's not about culture. It's about the doctor-patient interaction, which is what N.A.P.P is all about. So I leave you with that. It will be there for any of you who happen to be interested and want powder in your guns. I want to finish with a few words about Patricia Wilkie, because she has, as you know, been very active in N.A.P.P for a great many years, and I think it's my privilege as your patron to speak, I hope, on your behalf, to pay a tribute to our president. She has been an absolutely outstanding advocate for patients, and in particular for patient participation. Her record is unique in the British Isles. She is the only person who has been active in the Patients Association, led the patient group in the Royal College of General Practitioners, led the patient group in the Royal College of Radiologists, served on the Committee of Safety of Medicine as a patient representative, led the patients in the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, that's all the colleges put together, and now has joined us as N.A.P., fortunately, has almost come on to give us supreme leadership, which has been recognised for the only time in patient participation with an OBE. We are very fortunate to have had her. I want to make it clear that she's not leaving us. She's leaving as chairman, but at the moment she's carrying the double load of chairman and president. And I understand that a new chairman has just been found and appointed, who, unfortunately, it's so recent he couldn't be with us today. But Patricia's going to stay as president, and with her enormous experience and skills, will still be helping N.A.P. And so I think we're looking at somebody who has worked colossally hard. I've known her for 25 years. She really works. She really reads the papers, and that's one of the great strengths. She actually knows her stuff. She is absolutely meticulous at following things through. She is very brave. She will speak up in rooms where all the rest of the room don't agree, and she'll speak up for patients. She'll speak for patients, she'll speak up for patients. And she does it with determination and passion. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you'll join me in expressing our thanks in the usual way.
Thank you, Denis. Thank you, everybody. I just need to re-emphasize, I'm not going away, so you haven't lost me. I will continue to be a nuisance and ask awkward questions and do lots of work. Before we go on to the AGM, I would particularly like to thank our patron for his superb summing up. As always, it is succinct and clear and so helpful, and you will be able to get a copy of it shortly, as you will of all the slides. And I would also like to personally thank the Corkill winners. I think they were outstanding, and they were just, they stimulated and they thought, this is what it's about. And if not, everybody should know about it. Mr. Hunt should know about them too. And I might just do something about that. You never know. I would also like to thank N.A.P.P. Board of Trustees, because without them, this would not have happened today. They have worked tirelessly, and it's a small band, half a dozen, who've produced this. And our Chief Executive, Paul Devlin. Also a little thanks, they may have gone, to our photographer and our sound people who have helped us to make it so good. And there will be sound bites and everything on the website very shortly. Thank you all. Please stay for the AGM, the more the merrier. But thank you all for coming. Thanks.